I'm so curious to know, like, what did that require, at hand when it talks about shedding because you're confronted with parts of yourself that could be very painful and confronting?
The version of me that needed to be shed was a woman who believed that her value came from how much she could carry, how much she could fix, how much she could prove, how much she could please, and ultimately how much she could survive. So I was deeply capable, but I was exhausted. I was high functioning, but I was fragmented because I was giving pieces of myself constantly. So then I became disconnected from myself. So it's almost like trying to walk through the wilderness without a compass, trying to go hiking without a compass. You don't have a true north because we as women oftentimes find our worth in sacrifice, our worth in giving, our worth in performing, our worth in doing. And every time we do that, when God is not asking us to, we're giving bits and pieces of ourselves. And so before I knew it, like I thought I was performing a strength, but I was just operating out of deficiency. And God had to go and confront the places in me last year where I had confused self abandonment with strength, where I had confused performance with purpose. So I had misapplied powerful, beautiful words. That's a big danger for us as women. And I constantly am working with whether it's an executive at a Fortune 500 or it's a pastor's wife or it's my friend or a neighbor down the street. So often our inappropriate definition of a word causes us more pain, causes us to be stuck. And when we misapply words with false definitions, it keeps us buried alive. And so this rebirth was God getting clear with me on what real definitions, what He actually cares about, not what the world cares about, and realigning me to wholeness and instead of survival. Because the thing about women, a lot of women, almost every woman I know is in some way, shape, or form just trying to stay alive. But when we're just trying to stay alive, that's keeping us from living fully alive. Surviving is not the same thing as living fulfilled. Surviving is not the same thing as allowing God to let you live to the fullest potential. And I want to live fully alive because it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. And so there's this wings, this elevation, this rising, this rebirth that is needed to soar. But that has to come when we're no longer willing to settle to just survive.
Where did surrender begin for you? You're still moving forward. I think this is something I want to unpack a little bit. I think we shrink back and wait to get all our ducks in order because we want certainty.
Yeah.
So we can almost have this tension of we've stepped out. By stepping out, doing the work you're called to, because you're just mentioning this rebirth of last year and just God revealing this deeper layer. But you've been obedient, walking into the calling, bravely taking steps, and it required you to take the step to discover this next layer. Many times we're wrestling, thinking we're supposed to shrink back, pause everything God told us to start doing, and let's go get fixed, or like the concept idea, I'll freeze up right now from doing so that I can retreat and realign. But I've seen you walk in your obedience to the call while then coming into this deeper layer. Can you unpack that a little bit?
It's such a difficult wound to heal is a woman's knee-jerk reaction or default to shrink or to settle because we're givers, we're nurturers, right? So it comes natural to us almost to our own deficiency. And when I looked at my own life, I thought that what God wanted me to do was just hold the line, take things that I shouldn't be taking, allow abuse that should not be taking place, but just hold on and stay strong. And as long as I'm holding on and staying strong through these disappointments, through this abuse, through these betrayals, that I was honoring Him and I was obeying Him. But again, it was a misdefinition of what He was asking me to do. So the first thing for women is get clear on what is God actually asking you to do. Your default will be shrink or become small. But God does not want His women to live beneath the potential that He's called them to. They are beloved daughters that carry His name. So what does it mean to actually live that way? And so what is happening when you stop shrinking, at least for me, when I stopped trying to overfunction, everything became more honest. My relationships became more honest. I could do like an audit of my life and be able to identify where are the people I'm trying to rescue and give, but they become takers and I need to reevaluate. But that required me getting honest and requires sitting in the discomfort of what we try and run from. So as women, we tend to distract, overly give, overfunction, high perform, and fill our to-do lists with so many things that keeps us numbed and distracted though from really doing the work of honesty. And so not shrinking required me to get honest with my relationships. My leadership became more honest, my boundaries became more honest, and my faith became more honest because this internal honesty then produces an external clarity on where I actually need to step more fully in to the ring. Where am I diluting my voice that is actually part of the assignment God has for me? Where am I so afraid of hurting someone's feelings when in fact Jesus is saying, truth can hurt. Allow me to let them hurt in this minute so that they can learn a lesson that can actually set them free. But you keep robbing them of their lesson because you don't want them to hurt. So there's all of this. All of this is about getting clear and getting honest. And when we stop shrinking, we stop asking for permission to take up the space God has already assigned for us. And so when you stop overly functioning, then you also realize that I've been carrying what was never mine to carry in the first place. And that's what that whole year is. And also something had to learn myself and something I teach women all the time is being busy is not a virtue. Not asking for help doesn't make you stronger. It's just how you self protect it. And we have, again, a lot of us are calling we're strong, but I'm like, no, honey, you're self protecting. There's a difference. And a lot of us are thinking that we're living in our power, but I'm like, no, honey, you're performing. And control and trust are not the same thing. So, again, getting really honest and clear on what these words that God is telling us to is essential. And then getting honest with ourselves and then willing to sit in the discomfort required for true change to take place, whether it's an unlearning or a learning.
So good, so good. I've heard you speak on how important it is for you to understand and evaluate what your actual values are so you can show up authentically in those values you uphold. From what you're mentioning, it's the necessary evaluating all these areas, belief systems of the past. I mean, that's where the work that I processed myself. There's a version of me that was attempting to do God's will, whether in ministry, whether in the marketplace, and I was showing up beautifully to the assignment at hand. But I realized the same as you that I arrived to many, it can almost look like you're succeeding in these areas, but it's like you're saying there's an internal wrestle, that there's a part of you that's not being authentic to who you were called and created to be. So you almost feel this unsettling, even though you've, achieved that milestone, that goal setting. If you're not living through the values you say you uphold, there's a wrestle and tension in that. I was building to the best of my ability and understanding. And until I took time to sit with the fragmented parts that were coming up, the disappointment, the grief, the loss, like just not just bypassing it, but actually going like, what is this? Let's sit with that. God, answer that. Have wrestling with the actual questions. And it really began to redefine even the values at hand, like what I thought was valuable, right? And you speak on rising above, but the only way you can rise to the occasion of that is through values. So one of the things you speak about women disconnected with their voice and then it steals their freedom. Where do you see this the most in a critical time of a woman that you are coaching or guiding?
You already hit the nail on the head, which is when we have to get honest about what are we really saying that we value? Additionally, when we talk about our values, there are strengths, but there also are weaknesses. And a lot of us forget the weakness part or the shadow part of it. So for example, um, I do this exercise that Ingrid is mentioning, where I ask my clients to choose 5 to 7 core values. And what these core values mean is like, I believe that for where I am in this season of my life, this is how God has woven me together to find fulfillment, to serve, to get alignment. And so it becomes measurables for how we learn, am I living in alignment with what I say I value or not? So for example, one of my top values is freedom. It's even my company name is called Boundless, right? Because I know that I was put on this earth to break chains. I know I was put on this earth to help women see, to step out of the box that they've put God and themselves in. I know that I am here to help us live a limitless life, not because of our power or might, but because of the spirit that lives in us. Because again, Christ died to set us free. And so, since freedom is my value, I wanted to be an entrepreneur because you can't have more freedom than being an entrepreneur. I create my own schedule, but with that also comes its own costs, right? So when we choose a value, I have to be careful. One, am I living in alignment with what I said was important to me, which is freedom? Number two, do I have it or does it have me? Meaning, if I am leading out the value, freedom's not controlling me. But if freedom, my knee jerk desire to have freedom at all costs, has me, it's become an idol in my life. And too many people, for example, women will have family as one of their values, which is beautiful. But when I look at the women who've chosen family, let's say, as one of their values, a lot of times this woman has abandoned herself so completely because she values family above all else. But the problem is, great, you love your family well, but you've also eradicated yourself, which is not honoring to God either. Self erasure does not equal valuing family. So we have to learn to we lead out our values, not let our values lead out us. And so in this process of rising above, getting clear, are you leading your values or is it leading you? And what what needs to take place? What weight do you need to drop so you can actually rise? Is it self-betrayal? Is it patterns and cycles generationally that you can't get free from? But are you willing to do the thing that the pattern is requiring you not to? Can you get disconnected from your own self-doubt enough to take the quiet step of obedience? Is your identity rooted in performance? Is your identity rooted in family to the point where you don't know yourself? Wherever you are applying your values, it is your superpower, but it is also your kryptonite. And so sitting in that has been an essential tool to help women understand where it is you're going and what you are rising for. Because again, your elevation is completely dependent on the depth you're willing to go to get internal healing and internal clarity.
So good, Lauren. Wow, so good. I want to dive in how you, in regards to that post as well, you said you chose restore for 2026. What does he restores my soul look like walking that out in this new year?
It's so funny because when I asked again for the new word each year, I was really surprised to get restore for 2026 because I was like, wait, I just had a whole rebirth in 2025. So now it feels like, because rebirth's like, eye on the prize, glass ceiling, let's soar. And then he was like, now it felt like restore, which then kind of felt like the opposite. I thought it would be something like rain or like, this big, powerful word afterwards. And what I realized, and which is what I wrote in the post, is that a rebirth was a dismantling and a shedding of old versions of me that I had to let go of in order to get to the next level. But there were also parts of me that I left behind long ago because of disappointment, because of pain, because of heartbreak, my human way of trying to protect myself. I forgot her and I let 13-year-old Lauren, 17-year-old Lauren, 6-year-old Lauren go on not loved well. And but Jesus loved her well. And so this restoration process is the homecoming I mentioned in the post. This returning to home while simultaneously elevating to greater heights. And that's the tension. The tension is the rebirth, the renaissance, while at the same time coming back to who you were created to be at your essence. And I think true restoration happens when your inner world finally becomes safe enough for truth, peace, and alignment to live there again. And again, this is where we often self medicate. As women, we're really good at self medicating, whether it's through keeping busy, to do lists, fragmenting ourselves out to so many people. It's easier because it's more familiar. But until we learn to sit in the discomfort of not doing that, restoration can't take place. When I read in Psalm 23, he restores my soul, it always feels to me like I'm walking through a desert and someone offered me a cool cup of water. That's how I owe this like feeling I get when I pray every morning and throughout the day. Restore my soul. restore my soul. Because my soul is what has 6-year-old me in there. My soul is what has 17-year-old me in there. And those parts of me that I needed back then but wasn't able to be, it's not from a place of shame. It's now from a place of love. And that love and that clarity and that cup of cold water that only Jesus can bring when you allow him to, because you're no longer operating in self protection, but surrender. He can take you to places that bring you to homecoming.
And the bravery that it takes to allow him to lead you there.
Exactly.
One of my biggest desire for women to know, it's there will be a breaking,
Yeah.
but in his presence, it's that he's demolishing the belief systems that have shaped you and making you live less than what he actually called you to, because you're still seeing the narrative of I might not be worthy for this, or the actual hidden lies that have shaped the way you show up. I'd love for you to really guide those that are watching and understanding of being that, not only the honesty of that, but the responsibility that no one's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Because I know, and I spent some seasons of my life outsourcing the blame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outsourcing, I'm disappointed in that partnership, and I'm disappointed that that person didn't show up the way that I hoped for. I gave my heart, but I didn't have, which you're amazing at, really guiding people in regards to having conversations that are authentic, to staying true, but then being honest. I think one of the biggest things is us taking personal
Yeah.
responsibility in not outsourcing. There's room and space, because I hear me well. What I want to say is, in the presence of God, I have found that he has room and space to hear it. Tell me the disappointment. You can't bypass that. That's what we're
Yeah.
at. What that's what we're encouraging women to sit with. Sit with the discomfort, because you
Yeah.
can't bypass it. If you're not willing to be honest, too, for me, it's like my honesty to Abba is my safe space. It's the
Yes.
place where he has room and space to say, yeah, let's sit with that. Let's go deeper in that. But then there's this opportunity, and I would say actually invitation, where he says, okay, can I change your perspective? And can you take what's in your hand to take personal responsibility? And that inner work is an invitation that you must say yes to.
So good.
So sitting with the reality of what you say is important, the tension of all of that in between. What would you say in your own personal journey of both taking inventory, what shaped you, but then that release that is necessary and forgiveness to be able to step into the fullness of the way you show up in the new version that God has highlighted you to become?
Yeah, I think you named it, and it's ownership, hands down. If I had to boil down one word in that, what I'm doing with my clients, or even what I do in my friendships, or even when I'm spending time in reflection of myself, it's ownership. Because we often have a tendency to hyper spiritualize things in an unconscious way to abdicate from decision making. So we'll be like, I'm waiting on God. Okay, like that's real. Like you may not be able to perform the God thing, but have you done what you need to do on your part? Dr. Darius Daniels has this great illustration where he talks about how there's two different seasons in partnering with God, because that's another thing I think we forget is we don't become active participants in the life that God is building with us. And that's why there's an invitation. You get to RSVP yes, RSVP no. Too many of us have the invitation sitting on the counter unopened because we're too scared of what's inside, but then we're belaboring and telling all our friends to pray. God hasn't answered yet, and I'm just waiting and I'm just holding on. And, praise Jesus, he's on the throne, but boy, it's hard. And we're keeping ourselves stuck. And it's also an illusion. It's an illusion. And the invitation is sitting there right there. You can take your next steps. And so the ownership is there are some seasons when we're partnering with God in his plans where he is either A, asking us to do something so then he can follow through on his job. So this could look like walk around the walls of Jericho 6 times and then I will. Or go fill up the jars of oil and then I will. Or go take this step out of the boat and then I will. So that is these moments in these seasons that you have to evaluate and say, am I in a season where God is asking me to do something and it's just me having to be obedient? Have I been obedient to the thing that he asked me to do so that he can do his part? That's God will own his part, but are you owning your part? If it's not that season, then it's always this one, which is a transformation season. There are sometimes when you can't get to your next level, your transportation is completely dependent on the transformation you're willing to undergo. So, in a place where A is about doing and then God will, this is a place about becoming and then God will. So, the becoming is this dismantling again of old versions, this getting really honest and sitting in the discomfort. Everyone wants to be a butterfly. Am I willing to go into the chrysalis and actually become undone to the point where I'm goo so I can be rebirthed in something new? It is the definition of a metamorphosis. It's the definition of transformation. And if you are not willing to get real with yourself so that you cannot sit in the autonomy, agency, and authority given to you through Christ Jesus to take ownership, to be a leader, to have self-leadership, then you're going to stay stuck, baby girl. And that's not on God. That's on you. So that's the hard truth of there are so many things that are outside of our control, and we mourn and we wail and we grieve and we long and we lament and we cry out and we question and we doubt, and that's real. And I praise God that we have a God who's big enough to hold all of it. And we wait. And if we are thinking everything in life is that, then we're missing it, because there are things within your control. And if you're not having the courage to take the ownership required to get into the driver's seat of your own life, God will be your GPS. God has the engine. God knows where the vehicle is going. You don't need to know where it's going, but are you driving it? Or are you in the back seat letting your mom or your husband or your friends or the follower account you have on Instagram or your fear or your anxiety in the driver's seat? And that's the pain and the discomfort of the shedding, getting real with yourself to turn into goo. But the good news is God will transform it if you're willing to be emulsified. That's the transformation.
I hope that this conversation was a great blessing to you and encouragement, but more importantly, that it brings you back to the Father. I personally have created a Soul Care Activation Companion for this very reason, to lead you back to reflection questions in the presence of the Holy Spirit, so that you can truly do the inner work and be transformed, not just consume the information, but truly be transformed by the presence of the Holy Spirit. Make sure to scan the QR code as you will sign up and receive it in your inbox, and double check that spam folder just in case we might have landed there. But I really create these with intentionality for you to draw near to the Father. May this be of great blessing, and may you see the importance of spirit, soul, and body and how important it is to the Father.